billions of rands have been recovered by the South African Revenue Service with the help of artificial intelligence. Now, some of the methods used include debt propensity modeling and the use of data science to evaluate income tax, VAT, and company returns received. SARS started their digitisation process just over 3 years ago to ensure tax compliance. Other proactive measures, such as working with third parties to recover debt, have also been introduced. But let's bring in SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter to expand more on this. Commissioner, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I thought this was really interesting when we're starting to see the revenue collector starting to, I suppose, move with the times into the fourth industrial revolution. But to talk to us about how AI has been used in some of your work at SARS.
Thank you, Naledi. I think the first message is that we use AI and data to improve our service to taxpayers. I think we always focus on the enforcement, and I'll come to that in a moment. But our first important objective is to make taxpayers aware of their obligations and to help them fulfill those obligations. Let me give you an example of that. For 4 million people in this current financial year, they would not have had to submit a return at all because they have a standard income structure and we can access all their data from third-party providers. In that instance, we use that third-party data and we use machine learning algorithms, our AI modeling, to provide them with an assessment outcome. If they accept that assessment outcome, and by the way, 97% of them do, they have to do nothing. Their refund will be in the bank in under 72 hours.
Okay.
So that's important. But the same data that trawls through the same machine learning algorithms and AI that works and trawls through all of this tons and tons of data also then helps us to detect anything that is unusual. So let me give you an example of that. We, for example, had to process, up until the end of December, almost 14 million income tax returns, VAT returns, company returns. It is humanly impossible for SARS to capture all that data manually and to process it for human beings to apply their minds and provide an assessment outcome, which is our duty.
Right.
So using, again, the same risk profiling and risk detection, fraud risk detection modeling, we have been able to work through the 14 million returns, most of which we receive online, and detect risk with 1.5 million of those returns. Those returns are then put aside, and about 600 of our staff will engage with the taxpayers, will apply their own mind, and just that work that have detected risk in 1.5 million returns have yielded 66 billion rands of money that would not have been in the fiscus.
Okay.
Most of that money is preventing fraudulent or impermissible refunds to flow out. And then you mentioned the debt. 70 billion rand of debt has been collected as at the end of January. So it's an important piece of work, and a smart modern SARS cannot work without data science and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very interesting, and it's just fascinating to see how effective AI can be when we start to use it in some of our biggest systems. But I want to start to bring back a story that I think has gotten a lot of us talking, certainly over the past 24 hours, and that is the issue around SASFIN, this 4.8 billion rand suit that you're chasing against the bank. And I think it's it's an interesting one because SASFIN has already spoken out. Essentially, what they've said is that they find it not sensible that the revenue collector would go after the bank for the activities that have been, undertaken by the bank's clients. And of course, they've come out as well and said they have no knowledge of the hundreds of millions of rand, or 8.2 billion rand that has been moved through the bank and moved offshore. No knowledge from a senior point of view of the bank. I mean, what's your response to what we've heard from SASFIN so far, that SARS cannot go after the bank for the activities of their clients?
Well, Naledi, let me first say that I'm only able to talk about this matter publicly because SASFIN issued a SENS announcement yesterday. And until matters are on the public record, SARS may not talk about it. So given that SASFIN made the SENS announcement, which, by the way, is a requirement in terms of their listing requirements to issue this to shareholders, because it is now a contingent liability, we are able to share with the public that SARS has instituted legal proceedings against the bank. The matter and the detail and substance of which we cannot disclose. These will be issued as arguments and representations in the process, and that will, I'm sure, become public knowledge over time. So any mentioning of amounts or substance is really only in the public domain because SASFIN has issued such statements. Let me, however, zoom out from SASFIN and talk about an important principle that every single bank in South Africa must be held accountable for. And this is the duty of care in respect of the transactions that clients use the bank for. Banks cannot simply plead ignorance or deniability. There are laws in our Financial Intelligence Act that requires banks to report certain transactions if they suspect that they may be questionable. Banks get close enough to see the repeatability, the nature of the volume of transactions. And my message to banks would be, you cannot simply follow this from a compliance tick-the-box perspective. You have to manage it from a risk to the entire financial ecosystem. But obviously, very often, it is better not to know than to find out, because then you have to take actions. And the elephant in the room is very often there are important clients with long-standing relationships, all of which provide profitable business opportunities for banks.
All right.
And so as a general principle, we think that this is a principle that must be tested in a court of law, and we would be happy to go all the way and proceed with the legal findings so that we create a certainty by getting the courts to declare on this principle.
And hopefully, the courts will then help you set that precedent as well. And we'll be watching your court steps very, very closely, Commissioner. I can't let you go without asking this question. Of course, we heard, that the President has extended your time as Commissioner of SARS for an extra 2 years. And I think one of the things that we've seen in your tenure is the discussion around the massive responsibility that you've had to restore the integrity of the revenue collector after what some have termed the Zuma-led Tom Moyane era. How do you think you fared in that particular task?
Naledi, the truth be told is if a new CEO comes into an organization, it takes, the best part of the first year or two just to address the soft issues, to build a greater level of employee engagement, to change the ethos, the levels of trust that were eroded and broken, and SARS was no different in this regard. Then you formulate a strategic map, and then you start implementing it. So any CEO will tell you it'll take probably closer to 10 years to give effect to this. We had to deal not only with a badly impaired SARS, but just heading into it, we had a few other headwinds. The big headwind was COVID, and COVID really disrupted us and slowed us down. In certain ways, it also helped us to accelerate our modernization, but it really, in the softer stuff, in the engaging stuff, it definitely had an impact. The second headwind was we were in a sluggish economic environment, which also has a huge impact on compliance when businesses and individuals are struggling with their own resources. And so we've had a number of headwinds which made me feel at the end of the 5 years, we probably need just a few years longer. We're also entering a period of transition with the end of this administration. And so when the president then asked me if I would consider staying on, those were some of the issues that I reflected on and agreed to a further 2 years. And this will allow us to embed further the strategic intent that we had. So don't expect a big change of direction or strategy,
right,
but it's to embed that further, but also to allow us to strengthen the leadership bench at SARS and allow for a more orderly transition. Remember, leadership is not only about the commissioner, it is about the entire leadership system.
And that's essentially what we've heard from the president as well, is that this 2-year period is to allow for an orderly transition of leadership. Commissioner Kieswetter, an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We'll continue engaging in the future. SARS Commissioner there, Edward Kieswetter, speaking to us.